say this world, I mean it. I don't mean it in an ideal sense. I mean it every day, every little thing you do. It's such a gimme. Everybody back off. You know, everybody like you taught that from school, everywhere. Big business. You want to be successful. You want to be like Trump.
What happened to that big dream? Them 40 acres. When will it come true? When you meet your maker? What happened to the big house and that white fence? 500 years of slavery still ain't got shit. What?
The American dream wasn't meant for me. This Lady Liberty is a hypocrite. She lied to me. She promised me freedom, education, and equality, but never gave me nothing but slavery. And now look at me. Look how dangerous you made me.
Was it a dream or a nightmare? It ain't quite clear. Lady Liberty ain't did shit for me, but sold me lies and stole my history. What's a king without a dream? And what's a Malcolm without a means? What's a Garvey without a stream? And what's a Panther without a lead? Hi, my name is Dominique White, and I am a resident and product of Gary. Being a product of Gary, I learned so many things. I learned that one, education is the key to the city, and two, that Gary was once a place of abundance until 1966, when Gary first elected is first black mayor, Richard Hatcher, who became the first black mayor of a major American
Richard
city.
Hatcher came to Gary, the first African American mayor in a major city of the United States ever seen. He came during the time either right before or right at the time of the Black Panther movement. America was going through some change that it had never seen before. A major industrial city. You had United States Steel there, the biggest steel company in the world, built by Carnegie, I believe it was, built by Carnegie on the shores of Lake Michigan, a multi-billion-dollar industry. And so he comes to the city, and it brought us in surprise. We'd never run anything before. The last time you had major African Americans in Congress overseas, I think it was during the Reconstruction period, right behind Abraham Lincoln coming into office, and then there were a lot of African Americans voted in right behind Reconstruction to the House, or the Senate, or the House of Reps, I believe it was. I don't think we ever had any senators at the time. So to have an African American mayor, it was a pride thing. We were proud of ourselves, such like it is with Obama, I presume, right? So to have Hatcher in office, everybody was proud and happy. But then what began to happen is, I mean, he challenged the governor of the state of Indiana. I mean, you know, he told the governor, you want to meet with me, you come to my city. No African American man ever had the mitigated audacity to tell a governor that you want to meet with me, you come to my city. And so he did. He started a process of thinking that we don't have to be less than, we're equal to, right?
Yes.
Well, there came an economic backlash to that, where you had what they called at the time white flight. I don't know if they still coined it that, but that's about white flight, economic flight. Everything in his grandmama left Gary quickly. I think Gary what changed over in a matter of 15 years, I believe 15 to 20 years. It went from predominantly Caucasian to predominantly African American under a black mayor.
Yeah.
The point that made the difference was the election of Mayor Richard Gordon Hatcher as the mayor of the city of Gary. The Hatcher administration caused panic on the part of white citizens. They never thought it would happen. When it did occur, because of panicking, people understand how to respond to these kinds of situations. They say, okay, you take over the political process. We'll take the lifeline from you. We'll take the blood from you. We'll take the economic base of your community, and you will die. Now, we're on life support right now, okay? But that would not have happened if it hadn't been for a legislator from Gary, who lived in Gary, who orchestrated this whole process.
It seems that the city sort of went downhill, and there was a white flight, if you will, when Gary had its first black mayor. And so
Gary begins to fall when we got the mayor elected, Mayor Hatcher. And I can remember when, you know, when the poor was poor, and when we had to stand in the food stamp lines and get the government cheese, and when you had to get your food stamps on a certain day, and the line would run from the building all the way up to 2-3 blocks because everybody in the city of Gary had to be there at that day to get their food stamps. That's when Gary fell. After Mayor Hatcher, here comes Mayor Bonds, and he tried to build Gary back up, which it didn't happen.
The change of Gary, I would say, started around the 1950s, 60s, during a era, or I should say, during a specific time of it once called white flight.
The mayor, he had ran all the business away because when he told him he wanted a 10% of taxes, the people told him no, they wasn't gonna do that. So they took their business and moved to Maryville, Cherville, Highland, Munster, Dyer, Portage. They moved out of the city. So that's leaving the city looking real bad on the back burner.
So, what mayor, when you speak of what mayor that did this?
Oh, that was Richard Gordon Hatchett.
The inner city began to be filled with blacks, and the whites began to move out. And this is what actually started the whole suburban era. So the change of Gary started around what Gary would call white flight, and this actually happened around the 1950s, 1960s. Yeah. So, who do we blame for the failures of these great American cities? Do we blame the black leadership, or do we blame the overall government system for the failures of these great American cities? When we look at Mayor Richard Hatcher, can we say that he is the downfall of Gary, or do we point out other factors?
Who do I blame for the downfall of our city? And there was a great man I once heard that said it's up to us to save us. The bridge broke, the levee gave way, the cavalry isn't coming. It's up to us to save us. And so I think, I don't want to displace blame on the mayor. I think that we've been in the country 245 years. We've been African Americans. We understood the economic and political atmosphere in which we had to survive. And so I don't want to blame the political process. It was our job to learn it, to duly learn it, to understand it, and to compete within the rules in which were set for us to play and to compete in. So I don't blame the political process, and I don't either blame the economic process, because money goes where money goes. I don't think that we as a community of African Americans did a good job of patronizing our own. I can remember we always thought somebody else's water was colder. We would not patronize African American lawyers that were in the city. We wouldn't patronize African American doctors in the city, CPAs. We didn't believe that the teachers of African descent in the Gary school system was just as good as the teachers in Valparaiso. And so I think it was a lot of self-hatred that was going on. If you really want to get down to it, the self-hatred that had been perpetuated among African Americans ever since we came across this trans-African slave trade from Mali, Ghana, and Songhay, from the west coast of Africa all the way here. I think a lot of self-hatred came out in that process, where we didn't believe that we were good enough to do business with each other. I recall there was many businesses along Broadway in Gary, not many, but several, and that sold shoes and clothing, and we wouldn't want to shop at those stores. Matter of fact, there was a senator, state representative, Dr. Vernon Smith. I know you know who he is. Dr. Vernon Smith had a clothing store. That man had some bad clothes, man. And people wouldn't even buy the clothes. They go out to somewhere else, what's the mall down there? South Lake Mall.
South Lake.
And we go to South Lake Mall and buy clothes, and we could buy them here. So, who do I blame for the economic downfall? I blame, if there is blame, I would lay it to the feet of the African American people for not coming up, galvanizing ourselves together, and being creative. We had the talent. We had the resources. I don't think that we patronize each other the way that we could have.
As a child, running through the streets of downtown Gary for major sales that they would have. They had a strong Chamber of Commerce, strong Merchants Association. They ran these big sales. Gary was the hub of Northwest Indiana, and people would just come from all over the whole region to shop in downtown Gary. As a young child, I would have to weave through people to get into the stores, especially at Christmas time. I mean, it was just amazing. And I never would have projected that we would be in the state that we are.
As far back as I can remember, Gary was a great place.
I grew up in this area, and I participated in the activities at the Stewart House, which was the first black settlement house in this area. In the summertime, we had the recreation that was here, the basketball court. In the wintertime, got cold, we had the opportunity to go inside of the building, small recreation, playing pool, the board games, and just to be able to engage each other in some positive things in this particular.
We had steel mills booming. We had Broadway bumping. It was Sears, Kresge's. We had plenty of stores located on Broadway all the way up till 61st and Broadway. The steel mills brought money into Gary. We had the Michael Jackson Theater that was located on 8th and Broadway, where we can go in there. And then back when Gary was Gary, and we had a lot of action going on.
Changed the world. What I learned in my research, the moment that changed the world was the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
In my estimation, you can't have a city. Do you know that Gary at one time was the highest paying school district in the nation? It had some of the top educators, African American, in the world. I mean, PhDs was teaching at Gary Roosevelt. I mean, they had African American scholars all throughout the system. They were the highest paid. They would send people. Matter of fact, Wallace, Superintendent Wallace, Wilson High School out in Miller. Wirt. Superintendent Wirt created Gary's school system that was one of the most leading innovative in the country, and so people would flock to Gary to get professional development. The teachers, when I came through, were some of the most passionate and devoted and caring, and became your second mom. So I don't think that we lack the talent. I think the talent was there. I think it was just fear or jealousy. And so now, as you know, there's a serious brain drain on the city. All of this young African American talent is leaving the city, has left. Basically, if they haven't left, they're leaving. And so that creates now a whole other issue, right?
Yes, sir. Do you think blacks migrating from the South had a huge effect on Gary?
Oh, indeed. When African Americans came out, my ancestors particularly, that left Columbus, Georgia, right outside of Columbus, Georgia, around Phoenix City, Alabama, they went north for the steel mills. They went to Dayton, Ohio, and Dayton didn't have, at that time back in the 50s and 60s, didn't have the kind of opportunities that Gary and East Chicago had. So they left and they went up there. There was tons of jobs. You can leave Amoco Oil Refinery and go over to U.S. Steel, leave U.S. Steel and go over to the LTV, leave LTV, go over to Inland Steel, leave Inland Steel, work for the gas company. I mean, there was hundreds of jobs. You didn't even have to have a high school diploma. I mean, people were making good money. I mean, look at the homes that were built. I think it devastated our people because those were individuals of hope, right? You had the Kennedy brothers, the Camelot. They saw in them someone who was a genuine friend, a supporter of equal rights and opportunity. Even though Kennedy drug his feet on the civil rights movement, right? And Dr. King told him that we're gonna march on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, whether you give us the U.S. Marshals or not, we're going. So Kennedy was a great guy. He didn't move as quickly as he could. However, what did happen was Lyndon Johnson, behind him, as you know, signed the civil rights and pushed the civil rights bill. But I think the death of the Kennedy brothers, Malcolm and Martin, devastated the psyche, the soul of the African people in this country. Particularly Martin and Malcolm. They were the hope. They were the dreamers. They were the inspirers. They were the ones who made us believe that we could do and become anything. And at the death of them, it sent shockwaves, not through the mind, but through the soul of a people. And to this day, you ask any African American where they were and what they were doing at the time of Martin's death, some of them start crying. I mean, they almost looked at that man like he was the Messiah. They saw in him a person who would really get us to a place where we could compete. And when he was taken away, it devastated their hearts and their minds. To the point that those people who were living at that time, my mother and grandmother, hadn't been that inspired again in this country until Obama was elected president the first time.
When you look at what potential we have for economic development here, you really do have to start with our existing assets. And our existing assets are transportation assets. They're the airport, they're the lakefront, they are the 4 highways that run through Gary and the 3 Class 1 rail lines. And so that speaks to the development of an intermodal yard, that speaks to the enhancement of the transportation in and out of the Gary Chicago International Airport. And so when you look at the 5-year plan, that really did require the building of some significant infrastructure, whereas the development of our transportation assets really...
I have faith and hope in the city of Gary. I believe that the prayers that I have prayed and others have prayed, the faith and the hope that we have that this city will bounce back. I may not be here to see it, but I do believe it will, because we have so much potential. We have so many natural resources here that the majority race wants, and they're going to come.
The first thing on your agenda as mayor of Gary?
I'm not, and I do understand that the Honorable Karen Freeman Wilson, the mayor of the city, has a tremendous task on our hands, so I will not try to undermine her efforts, because she has taken on a monumental task of moving that city. So what I say again is saying it from a second seat, not the driver's seat, right? She's in the driver's seat. So, but if I could recommend to her something to consider, the first thing, as she is doing, is to build a robust and thorough safety department, police, fire, and EMT safety department, to secure the safety of our citizens, right? And then from there, I would look at the healthcare and educational issues, right? So knowing that education is paramount, looking at the amount of charter schools that have been put into that city, right? That has decimated the Gary Community School Corporation, right? And their scores are no better necessarily over a long spectrum of time. So I'll look at public safety, I'll look at education, I'll look at infrastructure. And one of the things that gets me every time driving home is driving down the street and I got 15 million potholes before I can get home. I leave Gary and I have to go get a wheel, front end alignment on my car. But like, gosh, can we get the streets paved, But there's no money. So looking at public safety, looking at education, looking at health care issues. And then I look at tearing down those things which are an eyesore. But again, it takes money to do that, right? Look at how do we build an economic base? How do we bring jobs back? Who wants to come back? But I tell you this, as we end this question, I tell you this, they can make man-made lakes in Monroe County or in Marion County, but they're not making any more Great Lakes. So Gary has something that nobody else has, and that's a waterfront, right? And so the water from that lake takes care of Maryville, takes care of Holborn, it takes care of Highland, it takes care of Griffith. All of our water sucks through our city, comes to feed everybody else to the south of us, right? And then the homes in Gary on that lake still go for $1 million and $2 million. How I know? I saw it. I went to look to buy a beach home. I'm like, I can't afford this. There's still $1 million. Everything else tore down around it. That lakefront property is still, the price never went down. Matter of fact, it just went up. So I don't want my brothers and sisters to get discouraged that our city won't come back. I believe that it will. And I believe that other folk are indeed coming back as we speak. I was driving down Gary and I saw Asians, I saw Hispanics, I saw Caucasians. Like when I was growing up, there was nobody walking down Fifth Avenue at nighttime walking a dog. I mean, you got mugged, right? I mean, that's true. You don't walk down Broadway with a little dog, little chihuahua, And now I'm seeing Caucasians and Hispanics and everybody just enjoying the city, right? So it's coming back. It's coming back because they know that there's something that man cannot make, and that's that lakefront. And so as long as Karen Freeman Wilson continue to capitalize one of her natural assets. She has an airport there, bigger than any airport in the region outside of Chicago O'Hare and Midway, and she has a lakefront. So
who can we blame for the overall fail of the African American city? Can we blame the black mayor, the black leadership? Can we blame the overall government? Or can we blame ourselves, the citizens, the individuals, for not stepping up and being great citizens to the cities that we call home? I think that all those factors in my research has shown that all those factors are the reason why great African American cities fall. You know, it's like that African saying that says that it takes a village to raise a child. Well, I think that the African American community, once in a position of power, we lost that community. And at the same time of losing that community, we lost values of things like education, social changes, politics, and even economics. Like Dr. Hunter said that in his interview, that we had the potential. We did. But it's not what you have, it's what you do with it. It's not the resources that you have, it's how you use those resources. So, to my classmates, we blame for the fail of the African American city. And I must say, not only do we blame the African American leadership, but we also must blame ourselves, and we must blame the overall government. We had education, we had social change, we had the economics, and we had the other factors that made us a great community.
As real as it seemed, the American dream is nothing but another calculated scheme. Have us all locked up. They want us back in chains. That's why our history is a mystery. When will you see? Fuck the American dream.
What happened to that big dream? Them 40 acres. When will it come true? When you meet your maker? What happened to the big house and that white fence? 500 years of slavery still ain't got shit. For real. What would Malcolm say? By any means. What would Martin say? I have a dream. What would Garvey say? We need our own. What would Huey say? We need to lead. What would Malcolm say? By any means. What would Martin say? I have a dream. What would Garvey say? We need our own. What would Huey say? We need to lead.
Instead of us just being like slavery bad, bad white. I mean, alright, let's stop that. And everybody's smart enough to know that. I mean, we've been slacking. And I don't mean by like hours, 40 acres of view because it's fast. I mean, for us to be on our own, just be us meaning you, for us meaning black people, whatever you want to say, for us to be on our own, we do because we have been a good friend. We want to make a relationship type thing. We have been there, and now we deserve our payback. Like, you got a friend that you don't never look out. You know, you dress up with jewels. Now, Barry, you got jewels, they got paid and everything, and they lending money to everybody except us. And it's like, is America gonna help us ever? You know, because I mean, we know for a long time they haven't. Are they ever? And it's like, all these things are showing us no. And there's you know there's somebody going, no, they're not gonna help you. No, they're not gonna help you. And then of course, we sing it, no, they're not helping us. All BS aside, it all comes down to we gotta survive. I mean, even warriors put their spears down on Sundays. We got to survive here in this country. Because I'm not going back to Africa. We got to survive here. For us to survive here, white folks, black folks, Korean folks, Mexican folks, Puerto Ricans, we got to understand each other.